Hi, I'm Lorelei. I woke up 5 days before my birthday to find my credit card maxed out. $36,000 gone. At first, I thought it was fraud. But it wasn't a stranger, it was my family. My dad said I owed it to them. My mom laughed in the background. They used my name to fund a wedding I wasn't even invited to, then told people I had distanced myself. But how do you distance from people who were never really close? Who rehearsed your role in their life like a script, while rewriting your story without your permission? They didn't just drain my bank account, they rewrote my place in the family. So, what do you do when the people who raised you turn you into an account balance with a heartbeat? The buzz of my phone dragged me out of a light, restless sleep. I reached over without thinking, my fingers fumbling in the dark. The glow of the screen hit my eyes like a punch. 1:48 a.m. The message was short, brutal. Bank alert. Your credit card has reached its limit. Current balance, $36,000. I sat up, wide awake. That number didn't make sense. I hadn't spent anything in days. My chest tightened, a heavy weight pressing against my ribs. I blinked again, hoping I misread it. I hadn't. I opened the banking app. My heart pounded louder with each tap of my thumb. There it was. The full balance, maxed out. I clicked into the transaction history, expecting to see some massive glitch or a one-time charge that might explain everything. But instead, I found a string of charges I didn't recognize. Floral arrangements, catering services, a ballroom deposit, even custom embossed invitations. Each line stabbed deeper than the last. Luxury charges, local vendors, all within the past 72 hours. At first, I thought it might be fraud, some random thief who'd gotten lucky. But the pattern, it felt personal. Too close. My fingers trembled as I scrolled down further. I caught my reflection in the black screen, my face pale, eyes wide, mouth slightly open. Not horror, not yet. But something else, like betrayal that hadn't quite formed words. The apartment around me felt too quiet, as if the city had hushed itself to let me absorb the blow. I wrapped a blanket around my shoulders and padded barefoot into the kitchen. The cold tile stung my feet, but I welcomed the sharpness. It kept me from collapsing. I made coffee, not because I needed caffeine, but because it gave me something to do with my hands. The hum of the machine grounded me. Steam curled up and kissed my cheeks as I watched the screen on my phone flicker again. Another transaction processed, $184 for custom candle favors. Then I remembered, 5 days from now was my birthday. Not a milestone, not a big celebration. I had planned to treat myself to dinner, maybe grab a slice of cake from that bakery down the block. A quiet night. Alone, but not lonely. At least, I hadn't thought so. Until now. The pieces started to fall into place, not cleanly, but like a puzzle forced together out of desperation. My family had access to this account. Years ago, during a health scare with my dad, I had added them for emergencies. I never removed the access. Part of me thought, no, hoped, they'd never abuse it. I was wrong. The weight of that realization clamped down hard. I needed answers. I pulled up Vernon's contact and hit call. He answered on the third ring, groggy but not surprised. "What is it, Lorelei?" His voice was flat. Tired. Like I'd interrupted something mundane. "There's something wrong with my card," I said carefully. "It's maxed out. Over $36,000. Did something happen?" There was a pause. I could hear movement. Footsteps, maybe. Then his voice sharpened. "You always make everything dramatic," he snapped. "We needed it. That's what families do." I stood there, phone to my ear, heart thudding against my ribs. "You needed it?" "For the wedding, the bills, your mom's dental work, Celine's planning committee. You know how much pressure she's under." In the background, I heard my mother's laughter. Light, mocking. "She was gonna spend it on candles and cake anyway," she chimed in. "We had better plans." Better plans. For my money. Without asking. "I would have helped," I whispered. "You just did," Vernon said, voice hard. "We don't need to ask for what's ours." I hung up. My hand shook as I placed the phone face down on the counter. I stared out the window, the city lights blurred by the beginnings of tears. They didn't even see it as theft. To them, I was an extension of their credit line, a walking, talking resource. Not a daughter. I opened the browser on my laptop and logged into my accounts. Line by line, I saw the evidence. Subscriptions I never used. Hulu, Amazon Music, random online memberships I didn't remember approving. All tied to my name, my credit, my quiet contributions. Not anymore. I opened a spreadsheet. Named it. They don't see me. I typed every expense I'd ever covered for them. Groceries, hospital bills, tuition checks, car repairs. Row by row, it added up. Not just dollars, but years. Decades of being the reliable one. The fix-it child. Then I picked up the phone again and called the bank. "I'd like to freeze all activity," I said calmly. "Immediately." "Is this under duress?" the agent asked. "No," I replied, voice steady. "It's clarity." When the call ended, I didn't feel relief. Not yet. But I felt still. Like the moment right before a storm breaks. Quiet, cold, and heavy with something irreversible. Morning crept in through the slats of my blinds, soft and gray, like the apology I knew I'd never get. I hadn't really slept. I'd dozed for maybe 20 minutes at a time, my mind looping that call, my father's voice, clipped and cold, cutting through the early morning stillness like a blade. "We used what you owe us." The words stuck to my ribs like dried glue. I moved through my kitchen in slow motion, pouring coffee I didn't want into a mug I didn't remember washing. My apartment felt sterile, like a hotel room I was only passing through. The only personal item in sight was a birthday card sitting unopened by the sink. It was from last year, still unsigned. They'd never remember to sign it. But they remembered my passwords. I leaned against the counter, both hands wrapped around the mug, letting the heat seep into my skin. It wasn't just about the money. It was about what the money represented. Access, assumption, ownership. When had I become less of a person and more of a service? They'd been doing it for years. I just hadn't had the language for it until now. The flashbacks came quickly, uninvited. The second mortgage I paid off when Vernon just needed a little help to keep the house. The tuition refund for Celine after she dropped her second semester and didn't want Mom to know. I was the solution every time. And the second it was fixed, my name was scrubbed clean from the record. At a family BBQ 3 summers ago, Clarissa had laughed while telling a friend, "Celine pulled herself up. She's a fighter." I stood 10 feet away, smiling with tongs in my hand, knowing full well the fighter had been bankrolled with my savings. "We didn't raise you to hold debts over family," Dad once said, when I gently asked them to plan better next time. But they had raised me to carry theirs. Quietly and without interruption. I was mid-sip when a notification buzzed. I tapped the voicemail icon and played it on speaker without thinking. It was Celine. Or rather, a voice message she hadn't meant to send me. She was laughing with someone, probably that friend who always wore matching tracksuits. "Yeah, she's mad," Celine giggled. "But give it 2 days. She'll calm down. She always does. She'll pay, like always." I didn't flinch. I didn't throw my phone. I just stood there, the mug still pressed to my lips. The coffee cold now. That's who I was to them. Not Lorelei, not their sister, not their daughter. I was the check that never bounced. The quiet, yes. The doormat with a credit limit. I walked to my desk, pulled out a yellow legal pad, and started a list. Title: Debt Ledger Reverse. Itemized everything I could remember over the past 10 years. Gifts, loans, birthday parties I funded but wasn't invited to. Groceries I paid for just this once. Dental work. Emergency repairs. Plane tickets. Tuition. Halfway through the 3rd page, I stopped writing and just stared at the numbers. They weren't even the point. It wasn't the dollars that bruised. It was the expectation. That afternoon, I opened all my financial dashboards and changed every password. I revoked shared access, shut down connected apps, and flagged all foreign logins. I took my time. There was a rhythm to it. Click, confirm, save. Around 6, my phone lit up. A text from Clarissa. Netflix not working. Can you fix? I stared at it. Not angrily, not sadly. Just long enough to realize that was all I'd ever been to them. A fixer. A button they could press. I didn't reply. That was my reply. Later that night, I pulled up my utilities dashboard. I hadn't thought about it before, but something told me to check. Sure enough, the gas service at their house was still being paid out of my account. Had been for years. I remembered setting it up during a cold snap when Celine said the furnace was broken and Vernon didn't have time to call around. I hovered my cursor over the autopay toggle. My heart didn't race. My hands didn't shake. I just clicked. And that was it. They wouldn't know right away, but they would. And when they called, because they would, I wouldn't lie and say it was an accident. I wouldn't soften it with, just wanted to give you a heads up. I wouldn't answer at all. When the heat went out at their house, I wasn't the one who turned off the gas. I just stopped paying to keep it warm. The cursor blinked against the spreadsheet's white background, waiting for me to start. I was sitting at my desk in the quiet of late afternoon, the same spot where I used to balance budgets and pitch quarterly forecasts. Today, though, my laptop screen wasn't filled with client data. It was filled with numbers that hit closer to home. I titled the file Debt Ledger Reverse. Then I started typing. Line by line, I listed everything I had ever paid for, not for myself, but for them. Rent checks for my parents when Vernon's hours were cut. 2 semesters of tuition for Celine after she dropped her full scholarship. Emergency dental work for Mom. Car insurance renewals I autopaid and forgot to cancel. Vacations that were gifts from the family, but funded by my card. Housing, education, health, holidays, guilt. It was all there. I wasn't doing this to shame them. I wasn't even angry in the way I thought I should be. I just needed to see it, to prove to myself that I wasn't overreacting, that the pattern wasn't something I made up to justify walking away. I needed to make the invisible visible. In the middle of that growing list, I paused and walked over to the file cabinet. I hadn't opened that drawer in years. Inside was a folder labeled 2016, Dad, written in my own handwriting. I pulled it out, not entirely sure what I expected. I found it almost immediately. A financial co-ownership agreement with Vernon's signature and mine scrawled beside it. I could still hear his voice from that day. It's just a formality, sweetheart, in case something happens to me. There was no mention of him needing access to my accounts, no mention of restaurant deposits or ballroom rentals, but the paper gave him legal entry into every corner of my finances. I'd signed it because I was afraid he'd take it personally if I refused. He always had a way of making boundaries feel like betrayal. It hadn't been a backup plan. It had been a back door. I dropped the folder onto the floor and stood up, trying to shake off the cold crawling up my spine. My phone buzzed at that moment, a text from Beatrix, my cousin. She rarely reached out, which is why it surprised me enough to open it. Found this in an old photo album. Thought you'd want it, she wrote. Attached was a grainy photo from a summer trip we'd all taken years ago. Everyone was in swimsuits, laughing around a bonfire, holding marshmallows and sodas. Except me. In the corner, near the cabin porch, I was bent over a bucket, washing dishes alone. Beatrix had added a caption, "You always did the heavy lifting." I stared at that picture longer than I should have. It wasn't the dishwashing that got to me. It was how natural it looked, like that's where I belonged. Not beside them, but behind them, keeping things going, cleaning up, never seen. All those birthdays I'd funded, the Christmas lights I put up because Vernon's back hurt, the wine I bought so Clarissa could play hostess without dipping into her grocery envelope. They called me successful because they raised me right. But now I saw it for what it was. Every win of mine was repackaged as their sacrifice. They didn't celebrate my strength. They consumed it. I closed the photo, returned to the spreadsheet, and kept going. That evening, just before dinner, I logged into my Amazon Prime account, then Hulu, then Spotify, every streaming service, subscription, or digital convenience I had ever added my family to. I removed every device with a name I didn't recognize, or one I did. Clarissa's tablet, Vernon's smart TV, Selene's phone. They were all gone in 5 minutes. I didn't text to explain. I didn't warn them. It wasn't out of pettiness. It was hygiene, emotional hygiene. And then, like clockwork, the silence broke. Netflix not working. Can you look into it? Clarissa's text read, like nothing had happened. Like I hadn't frozen every account they'd leached off of. Like I was still the fix-it daughter, ready with passwords and apologies. I stared at her message, typed, deleted, typed again. The blinking cursor paused over each word I considered sending. Finally, I wrote back 2 words. Not anymore. Then I set my phone down, leaned back, and listened to the quiet settle over me like a soft, necessary fog. The kind you get lost in just long enough to find yourself again. That message was the first time I ever said no to my mother, and I didn't feel guilt. I felt power. Clarissa's message sat at the top of my lock screen. Netflix not working. Can you look into it? I didn't open it. I didn't need to. The tone, the timing, the gall. It was all too familiar. I stared at it for a beat, then swiped left and hit delete. No hesitation. No regret. I wasn't their tech support. I wasn't their lifeline. I was their daughter. At least, I thought I was. But over time, they stopped treating me like a person and started treating me like a plan, a subscription they assumed would auto-renew. The only difference was, this one came with a soul they'd forgotten existed. I made a second cup of coffee and leaned against the counter. The quiet in the apartment wasn't peaceful. It buzzed. Like a wire pulled too tight. I'd been ignoring the tension, letting it sit in the corners of my mind while I buried myself in work and responsibility. But today felt different. As I sipped, I caught a glimpse of last year's birthday on the calendar. I remembered making a dinner reservation at that Italian place on 5th, a small table by the window, just me and a glass of wine, maybe dessert if I felt generous toward myself. When I showed up, the hostess looked confused. "That reservation was canceled this morning," she said. I had called ahead, confirmed twice, but Clarissa had my login. I'd given it to her back when she couldn't keep up with all these tech things and needed help booking her church's choir dinners. Later that night, she'd claimed it was a simple mistake. I must have hit something. You know I get lost in those apps. I'd smiled and nodded, too tired to argue, too trained to swallow the anger. But this year, there would be no swallowed feelings, no blind forgiveness. That afternoon, I checked the mail, mostly junk, except for the latest bulletin from their church. I flipped through it while waiting for my lunch to reheat. Near the back, a bold line caught my eye. "Special thanks to the Kaczynski family for sponsoring the roof repairs." I froze. That was my check. $3,200, written and mailed 6 weeks ago when Clarissa said, "The church needs a miracle." Funny how miracles never came with receipts or credit. My name wasn't there. Not in print, not in the conversation, just theirs. I took a deep breath, tossed the bulletin in the trash, and walked straight to my laptop. No dramatic soundtrack, no storm brewing outside, just the click of keys and a dull ache building behind my ribs. I logged into the municipal utilities account, the one that, for years, I had used to pay not just my own bills, but theirs. Out of convenience, then habit, then guilt. Everything was still active. Electricity, water, gas, all tied to my payment profile. I disabled autopay. No email, no warning, no gentle transition. I didn't need them to know yet. I needed to know I could. A few days passed. Then came the call from the gas company. "We're following up regarding a failed payment on the account ending in 6127. We've notified the primary residents, Vernon and Clarissa." I thanked them, hung up, and waited. Within an hour, my phone lit up like a pinball machine. 5 calls from Clarissa. 2 from Vernon. 1 from a no-caller ID I knew was Celine. I let them all go to voicemail. This wasn't an accident. My silence wasn't passive anymore. It was armor. Later that night, just before I turned off my phone for the evening, a single text came in. Vernon, if this is how you treat family, don't expect us to be there when you fall. I stared at that sentence. My thumb hovered over the screen, then slowly lowered the phone without responding. And out loud, to no one but myself, I said, "You were never there when I stood." The email subject line hit me like a slap. Confirmation of business loan setup. I blinked. Once. Twice. My brain struggled to process it. I hadn't applied for any business loan. My pulse picked up speed as I clicked the message open, my eyes scanning through lines of formal banking language until I saw it. My name. Not just mentioned. Listed. As a co-owner of something called Shipman Family Kitchen, LLC. Shipman. Celine's last name. I kept scrolling, skimming past paragraphs about payment schedules and credit agreements until I found the application summary. There it was in black and white. Vernon Kaczynski, primary manager. Celine Shipman, co-manager. Lorelei Dahmer, financial guarantor and co-owner by legal power of attorney. I stared at those words like they belonged to someone else, a stranger, a character in a scam email. But it was my name, my tax ID, my credit history. They'd done it. They built something real, with loans and legal documents and partnerships on the back of my identity. And they hadn't even told me. I pushed back from the table, hands trembling but jaw locked. I stood for a while, just pacing, breathing, trying not to scream. Then the ping of a group chat message broke the silence. Family group thread. "You guys won't believe how easy it was. She's so busy with her spreadsheets she has no clue," read the text from my brother. Followed by a video of him laughing with Celine in the background, tossing business cards like confetti. "Big sis doesn't need to know everything." He grinned at the camera. Another comment came in seconds later from Aunt Janice. "She's always been too uptight to understand loyalty." Loyalty. That word cracked something open in my chest. I stared at the video until my eyes burned, then quietly saved it into a new folder on my desktop. Legal evidence. The name felt cold. Perfect. I wasn't angry. I was awake. I didn't call them. I didn't rant. I opened a new browser tab and searched for my attorney's number. Within an hour, I was on the phone, laying out every detail, starting with the forged POA document from 2016 and ending with a business that bore my name but never sought my consent. "I want the loan flagged," I told her. "I want my name off it, and I want to know every recourse available." She was calm, efficient, reassuring, and I felt for the first time in days like I was in control again. After that call, I pulled up the bank's dispute center and started the process. Uploaded scans of my signature, flagged the POA as revoked, and included screenshots from the family thread. Then I opened my accounts, business platforms, shared software, even my Dropbox. I started removing names. Vernon, Clarissa, Celine. All of them. Every shared plan, gone. Every profile that wasn't mine, deleted. I didn't warn them. I didn't explain. I'd done that dance too many times, always the one trying to be reasonable, the one who softened the blow while they sharpened the knives. Not anymore. That night, as I was tidying up the evidence files, my phone buzzed. Voicemail. Vernon's voice came through tight, cold, and sharp as gravel. "If you ruin this project, you ruin this family." I let the message play twice. Not because I needed to hear it again, but because I wanted to feel absolutely sure of what I heard. Ruin this family? They did that the day they decided I wasn't a daughter, just a convenient signature. I didn't cry. I didn't even feel heat behind my eyes. Instead, I looked out the window into the city lights and whispered to no one in particular. What they didn't know was I had already started building something too, just not with them. I started the morning by resetting everything. Not metaphorically. Literally. Router unplugged. VPN toggled. Two-factor authentication rekeyed. My home system had been the last frontier of shared access, small bits of data, old devices still connected, browser histories that remembered what I had long wanted to forget. Clearing out cookies and saved passwords used to be something I did when spring cleaning. Today, it felt like a ritual. I scrolled through autofill logins and deleted every entry that had Vernon or Clarissa's name on it. My thumb hovered over Celine's once, then removed her too. I whispered to myself, I'm unsubscribing from this entire family plan. My phone rang just after noon. Unknown caller. I let it go to voicemail. The message was exactly what I expected. Vernon's voice, raw and mocking. So what now? You gonna sue your own blood over some paperwork? He barked. Family means nothing to you anymore, huh? I didn't flinch. I didn't answer. I forwarded the voicemail to my attorney with a note. As discussed, first contact post notice. She replied within the hour. Standard intimidation. Expect escalation. I leaned back in my chair, letting the silence settle like a heavy quilt. I didn't need to explain anymore. I didn't need to justify. Vernon called it betrayal. I called it protection. I wasn't suing my family. I was protecting myself from people who no longer saw me as human, just as helpful. Later that afternoon, Jonah Geen from the bank called and left a message. His tone was flat, but not unfriendly. Ms. Dahmer, I wanted to confirm that multiple account actions were approved by Mr. Vernon Kaczynski using the authority granted under a 2016 POA document. He claimed full consent from all parties. He paused. This kind of thing happens more than you'd think. I saved the voicemail. Then I stood up, walked to the filing cabinet, and pulled out every document they had ever touched. I shredded the POA right there, one sheet at a time. No dramatic music, no trembling hands, just clarity and the soft grind of paper meeting blades. I spent the rest of the day locking down my identity. New accounts, new backup emails. I even updated my will, removed Vernon and Clarissa as emergency contacts, beneficiaries, guardians of nothing. They weren't part of my future. They had forfeited that right. By sundown, my house felt like mine again. For the first time in years, nothing in it echoed their presence. No shared devices. No shared names. I sat by the window, drinking tea, when I remembered something tucked away in the bottom drawer of my nightstand. My old phone. The one I'd had since I was 15. Still charged somehow. I turned it on and scrolled through the old call logs. The first number in the list was 911, called when I was 17. Vernon had passed out in the backyard, bottle still clutched in his hand. Clarissa had told me not to overreact. He's just tired, she said. Don't embarrass the family. I'd called anyway. That little girl thought she was saving her father. That little girl thought she was earning love. I looked at the phone for a moment longer before tossing it in the trash. That night, as I loaded the dishwasher, my phone buzzed again. Clarissa. I watched it ring. No picture, no sound, just the name that used to mean something. I let it ring out. Then again. The silence didn't feel empty. It felt earned. From across the room, music played low from my Bluetooth speaker. An old Tracy Chapman song. I walked into the living room, barefoot on cold tile, humming along without checking the screen. This time, I answer only to myself. I was scrolling through my feed with my usual morning coffee when the video popped up. Tagged by a woman I hadn't spoken to since high school, the caption read, "When your rich sister thinks she's the boss." It was my brother in the clip, standing behind a makeshift food counter with Celine. They were both laughing. He waved a spatula like a trophy. "She acts like she built this from scratch," he smirked. "Newsflash, she didn't even know we used her name." Someone off camera shouted, "Tell her thanks for the funding." The room erupted in laughter. I didn't press play again. I didn't need to. I'd seen enough. My thumb hovered over the share icon, but instead I saved it. I already had a folder for things like this. Evidence. Not because I needed revenge, but because someday someone would ask why. Less than an hour later, another clip surfaced. This one from Celine's Instagram Live. "Oops," she said, half smiling. "Looks like our ATM sister cut us off. Guess the Bank of Lorelei is officially closed." A stream of laughing emojis and OMGs poured in. Someone commented, "She'll come crawling back. They always do." Another added, "Tell her thanks for paying my Netflix." Celine glanced at the screen, realizing she was still live. She laughed it off. "Kidding, obviously," she said, voice tight. But her smirk gave it away. That was never a joke. That was muscle memory. I didn't cry, but the burn of humiliation settled deep. Not because they said it, but because they meant it, and they knew no one would stop them. I was a punchline in my own family. Mid-afternoon, Amanda texted me, "You need to see this. I'm sorry." It was a screenshot of Celine's scholarship essay. The first line read, "Growing up, I watched my family struggle while I overcame obstacles alone." And then, the dagger. "My sister worked a corporate job, but never really understood sacrifice. I didn't know what hit harder, the lie, or how easily it slid from her fingers onto a public document that could win her money and praise. The same sister who ghosted every semester. The same one who I bailed out when she maxed out her own cards on networking retreats." I stared at the screen long enough for it to dim, then locked my phone and sat in silence. They weren't confused. They weren't broken. They were calculated. I'd spent years diluting my wins to protect their pride. I stopped talking about promotions, avoided conversations about my salary, sent gifts anonymously. I didn't want to make anyone feel small, but they used my silence as a paintbrush to redraw the whole story, one in which I was a cold, distant woman who never gave, never felt. That story was over. I didn't call anyone. I didn't argue. I sat at my desk and opened a blank document titled Truth Timeline. Dates, screenshots, bank transfers, school payments, all of it. Not for a courtroom, for myself, because I was tired of pretending I imagined it. The next morning, I wrote to the scholarship board. The email was calm, clinical, and attached to it were PDF scans of every tuition receipt I had paid in Celine's name. I didn't need to accuse. The numbers spoke louder than rage. Then, I forwarded her essay to my lawyer. Subject: Intent to dispute. I poured myself a second cup of coffee and exhaled. It didn't feel victorious, but it did feel clean. Around dinner, my phone buzzed again. "Celine, why are you trying to ruin my chances?" Her message read. I didn't hesitate. "I'm just clearing my name from your script." Amanda didn't text first. She just showed up. It was early afternoon, and I was cleaning out a drawer full of tangled chargers and receipts when the knock came. I didn't expect anyone. My building had security, but Amanda knew how to bypass small systems. She always had. I opened the door and she stood there, hair pulled back, face drawn tight. She didn't speak right away, just reached into her coat pocket and handed me a flash drive. "You didn't get this from me," she said quietly, "and I was never here." Before I could ask anything, she turned and walked down the hall. I stood in the doorway for a moment longer, watching her back disappear into the elevator, then closed the door behind me and locked it. The flash drive was small, black, no label. I plugged it into my laptop. A single folder popped up, Family Strategy Meeting, Audio 2022. I clicked. The audio crackled, grainy like it had been recorded through a coat pocket, but the voices were unmistakable. Vernon: "We just keep her busy. That's all it takes. She doesn't ask questions when she feels useful." Clarissa: "Guilt works better than threats. She'll never leave if she thinks we'll fall apart without her." Celine: "She doesn't even check anymore, just pays." Amanda's mother: "And if she ever starts to pull away?" Vernon laughing: "Remind her who paid for piano lessons. Guilt with a bow on top." I froze. There it was. Not suspicion, not implication. Proof. They had sat down, like a committee, discussing how best to manipulate me, like a business strategy, like managing a product line. I played it again, not because I needed to, but because I wanted to make sure I wasn't imagining the venom under the calm. And then I saved it, made a backup. Then one more. Not even 20 minutes later, a text buzzed across my phone. Photos from Celine's wedding rehearsal. I hadn't been invited. I hadn't even known it was happening this weekend. But the flowers were familiar, identical to the invoice I'd seen on my billing summary. The venue, too. The same address listed under that suspicious charge 2 months ago. The ice sculpture. That was from my card. A custom-etched swan centerpiece, which apparently now sat beside a cake I didn't know existed. Clarissa had posted the photo with a caption, "Family makes everything possible." It was like being erased in slow motion, replaced by a smile that didn't remember who made it possible. I sat down at my desk, opened my email. Subject line, "Here's what you really built." I wrote to every relative, every sibling, every in-law. I attached the audio file, I attached the credit card breakdown, and I wrote just one line. "I'm not your ATM, I'm not your scapegoat, and I'm not your family anymore." Then I hit send. What came next was chaos. Calls, texts, voicemails, some frantic, some furious. Clarissa left 3 back-to-back messages, the last one teetering between apology and threat. Vernon didn't call. He texted, "You ruined us." I stared at it, then typed back without hesitation. "No, you ruined me. I just stopped funding it." Amanda texted too. "You didn't deserve any of this. I should have spoken up sooner. I'm sorry I stayed quiet." I replied simply, "You're not the one I needed to hear that from." I turned off my phone. Let the silence wash over me. The next morning, I was sipping coffee when the intercom buzzed. I pressed the button. The screen lit up. Vernon. He stood at the entrance, holding a manila folder, jaw clenched, eyes scanning the camera, like he already knew he wasn't welcome. I didn't move. The folder said, "Counterclaim." But he didn't know I'd already lawyered up 2 days earlier. I opened the door before he could knock a second time. Vernon stood there with a manila folder in one hand, the other already raised to speak. "We need to talk. You're not the first lawyer in this house anymore," I said calmly, and stepped aside just enough to make it clear he wasn't coming in. He paused, his mouth tightening into that familiar disapproving line. The same one he wore when I was 13 and dared to correct his math in front of a neighbor. "I'm not here to fight," he muttered, holding up the folder as if it were neutral territory. "Then don't," I replied. I didn't take the envelope. I didn't ask what was inside. I already knew. By the end of the day, the calls started. It began with second cousins, old church friends, and a college roommate I hadn't spoken to in years. "Are you okay?" I heard, "You're having some sort of breakdown." "They said you're dragging the family through court over nothing." Clarissa had done what she did best, reframe the truth until even the mirror got confused. I didn't respond to any of them. I kept a list. Names, numbers, timestamps. I called it "Do Not Engage," and each time someone parroted her story, without bothering to ask me directly, I added them to it. Later that night, I was cleaning out my archived documents when I stumbled upon a scanned letter, dated March 12, 2014. My handwriting. My heart. A letter I wrote to Clarissa, but never got a reply to. "Do you love me for me?" it said. "Or for what I do for you?" No reply. Not even a comment. She never acknowledged it. I had buried it beneath a pile of practical things. Tax forms, lease agreements, the kind of paperwork I'd always been good at. The silence had been my answer all along. I sat back in my chair, the paper still open on the screen. My chest tightened. Not with sadness, but with clarity. They never wanted me. They wanted my access, my image, my ability to get things done. Amanda's voicemail came in around 10 p.m. as I was preparing tea. "You were always the adult in that house," she said softly. even when you were a child." I didn't cry. I simply said it aloud, to the quiet room. That's the tragedy. The next morning, I called my attorney. "I'm ready to go public if they keep spreading lies," I told her. She didn't ask for proof. She already had it. We drafted a letter, brief, factual, attached with screenshots and the audio. A warning, really. Any continued defamation would be met with legal response. No more playing defense. I also updated my will. Vernon and Clarissa? Removed. Every trace of them scrubbed clean from my future. I was building a new kind of freedom, one with legal backing. That afternoon, Amanda sent a screenshot from Clarissa's Facebook. "Sometimes your own children destroy you," the post read. No tags, no names. But everyone knew. That was the beauty of small communities. Whispers louder than sirens. I didn't call. I didn't message. Instead, I posted a single sentence on my own page. No images, no hashtags. If telling the truth burns bridges, maybe they were never meant to carry me. The rain came slow and steady that Sunday morning, tapping the windows like someone too polite to knock loud. I stayed in bed longer than usual, not because I was tired, but because the silence didn't feel like a threat anymore. For the first time in weeks, there were no missed calls blinking on my phone. No voicemails full of guilt and manipulation, just quiet. I got up, lit a candle, and brewed a pot of tea. Orange spice, the kind I only made on days that felt like they might matter. At the kitchen table, I opened my laptop and pulled up a folder labeled Final Phase. It contained screenshots, PDFs, and account closures. Every joint account, gone. Every login they once had, changed. My financial summary glowed clean across the screen. Freedom didn't feel like fireworks. It felt like exhaling without wincing. Right before I closed the file, a new message slid into my inbox. It was from Evelyn. We weren't close. She was a friend of Clarissa's from the church choir. Older, quiet. She'd always been kind to me growing up. The kind of woman who offered hugs without squeezing the life out of you. Her email was short. "Lorelei, I know what they've said, but I saw what they did to you for years. You're not wrong. You're not broken. You're brave." I stared at those words like they were a lifeline I didn't realize I needed. Not because they healed everything, but because they came from someone who wasn't required to say anything, and still did. I left my tea untouched, walking to my desk to call my lawyer. She answered on the second ring. "Everything's finalized," she said before I could ask. "They're legally barred from accessing any of your accounts. Power of attorney? Revoked? All joint contracts? Canceled?" I didn't smile. I didn't celebrate. I just nodded. "Thank you," I said, then added, "It's strange, being free." "That feeling will catch up to you," she replied. I hung up and turned toward the living room window. The rain was still falling, gentler now. My mind wandered, uninvited, to a memory I rarely let surface. It was 3 years ago. Vernon had called late at night, voice tight with urgency. "I need a cosigner," he said. "Just a small business loan. Celine's trying to get on her feet. You understand." I said yes. I always did. That loan wrecked my credit for 8 months. I paid it off when Celine stopped making the minimum payments, and Vernon claimed he had no idea. I told no one. Just swallowed the bruise. Now, I whispered the phrase I never said back then. Never again. I spent the afternoon tying loose ends. The necklace Clarissa gave me when I turned 25, silver, dainty, engraved with, "For my strong girl," was packed into a small velvet pouch and dropped into the return slot at the donation center. I deleted every family photo from my social media, untagged myself from old posts. The shared vacation home, the one in Galveston with peeling paint and sand always stuck in the lock, sold last week. The deed was only in my name. The check cleared 2 days ago. I didn't tell them. I didn't need to. I opened my closet and began sorting clothes, pieces my mother had insisted I keep, outfits she bought and never let me forget. Into bags they went. a silent goodbye. Just before sunset, as I was folding the last cardigan, someone knocked on the door. I opened it to find Ava, my cousin, standing with a small cake in her hands, 3 candles lit and flickering despite the breeze. "I know it's late," she said, "but I didn't want you to feel forgotten." I stared at her, speechless for a moment, then stepped aside. She walked in, set the cake on the table, and smiled. "Some candles aren't meant for wishes, they're just light in the dark." I deleted the entire contact group titled Family. No hesitation, no double check, just a click and a quiet exhale. Then I made a new group, People Who Show Up. It had 3 names, Amanda, Ava, Evelyn. That was it. No part of me felt like crying, and I counted that as a kind of progress. I didn't need a parade of names or DNA to define who stood beside me. I just needed truth. Around lunchtime, a new email pinged in. No subject. The sender's address was unfamiliar, long, random, from some encrypted mail server. But the tone? Unmistakable. "Don't destroy Seleni's future. She still has a chance. Don't ruin that over past bitterness." No signature, just guilt dressed up as diplomacy. Clarissa always had a way of cloaking her manipulation in concern. She never begged. She hinted, never attacked, just implied. I didn't respond. I forwarded the message to my lawyer and deleted it from my inbox. By mid-afternoon, I found myself reaching for my journal, something I hadn't opened in weeks. The pages felt stiff, untouched for too long. I wrote, "I didn't want to be this distant. They built this distance with silence and strategy." The words came easily. I let them pour out, line after line, about all the versions of me I had tried to be. The fixer, the forgiver, the peacekeeper, the bridge. I reread what I had written, and without meaning to, tears spilled down my cheeks. Not for them, but for the younger me who once believed that if she did enough, gave enough, they would finally see her. Later that evening, I rearranged my apartment. Nothing drastic, just enough to make the space feel fully mine again. I moved the bookshelf near the window, bought a new throw pillow in a shade Clarissa always said washed me out, and hung a piece of abstract art I found at a thrift store. Speaking of thrift stores, I dropped off a sealed box at one on my way back from the post office. Inside were old family photos, frames, trinkets, a few cards I used to keep for nostalgia. I didn't leave a note. I didn't want them back. When friends asked me about my family now, I started referring to them as my old life. It wasn't bitter, it was accurate. That weekend, Ava invited me to a brunch. A few cousins were there, people who had kept their distance during the chaos, but didn't spread rumors either. Over omelets and coffee, someone finally asked gently, "Do you think you'll ever talk to them again?" I paused, not out of uncertainty, but because I wanted to say it right. "Forgiveness doesn't always mean a return," I said. "Sometimes it just means I don't bleed anymore." They nodded quietly, as if understanding came like the steam rising from their mugs, slow, invisible, but present. That night, I was folding laundry and listening to soft jazz when my phone buzzed. One new message, from a number I hadn't blocked, yet. The preview read, "I miss you, Celine." I stared at it for a long time. Not with anger, not with longing. Just a strange neutrality, like seeing an old coat in your closet that no longer fits. I didn't open it. I didn't delete it either. I turned the phone over, screen down on the table, and walked into the bedroom. I wasn't afraid of her apology. I just didn't need it anymore. I logged in for the last time. The family phone plan was the only thing left. A relic of better intentions, once meant to keep us all connected. 4 lines. 2 of them hadn't called me in months. One only dialed when something was broken or overdue. My cursor hovered over the Manage Account button. I wasn't nervous. I wasn't even angry. Just ready. With a single click, I removed each line. Vernon, Clarissa, Celine. Gone. The screen asked if I wanted to confirm. I whispered, "This is the last bill I'll ever pay in someone else's story." Then I clicked confirm and watched the page refresh into silence. That same morning, my lawyer filed the final packet of legal disassociation. The counterclaim Vernon had attempted was dismissed. Lack of evidence, lack of merit, lack of truth. Everything came back to me clean. Name, credit, financial identity. No one else had access anymore. The judge's summary was brief, almost casual. "She didn't cut ties," he said. "She corrected the record." I walked out of the courthouse without looking back. No family waiting on the steps, no cameras. Just a woman in flats, holding her own coat, with a quiet confidence that didn't need an audience. That evening, I published an op-ed. It was titled, "When Family Uses Your Kindness Like a Debit Card." It wasn't about revenge, it was about clarity. The story was mine, and for once, I told it in my own words. No filters, no edits. It went viral within 48 hours. Hundreds of messages filled my inbox. Strangers, coworkers, even distant acquaintances. "I'm Riley too. Thank you for saying it." "My daughter sent me this. She thinks I'm you." This made me call my therapist again. And just like that, I realized something I hadn't known I needed. I wasn't alone. I wasn't just healing, I was leading. A week later, Ava called to say Clarissa had asked to meet. She promised it would be neutral. Just a conversation. I said yes, with conditions. We met at a small cafe near downtown. I brought a friend from work and asked her to sit 2 tables away. I didn't feel fear. I just refused to be cornered again. Clarissa arrived wearing the same beige cardigan I always associated with performances. She smiled like it cost her something. "I never meant for it to go this far," she said, hands wrapped tightly around a paper cup. "But you meant every withdrawal, didn't you?" I replied. Her smile faltered. We sat for 20 minutes. She talked. I listened. She cried. I didn't. When she finally paused, I said the only thing I had rehearsed. "I forgive you, but I won't rebuild what you burned." She didn't argue. She just nodded. The kind of nod that wasn't acceptance, just recognition of a final page turning. I left her there, cup still full, cardigan sleeves damp with tears. I didn't feel triumphant. I felt steady. That night, I celebrated my birthday alone. Not lonely. Alone. I picked a small bookstore cafe tucked away in a quiet corner of Austin. I wore a soft black sweater, jeans that fit just right, and no makeup. I brought with me one gift, a blank leather journal titled Volume 1, Chosen Family. I ordered tea, found a corner seat by the window, and opened to the first page. With a pen I'd carried for a decade but never used, I wrote, "This time, I'm the author, and no one gets to edit me again. Some stories don't end with grand reunions or a perfect bow. They end in quiet clarity. If you've followed me through this journey, you'll know by now that choosing peace doesn't always look like forgiveness with open arms. Sometimes it's a locked door, a blank page, a new number in your phone you no longer answer. What I learned isn't just about family, it's about self-worth, about knowing when to stop pouring from a cup no one ever bothered to refill. Boundaries aren't walls, they're doors we choose to close, because what's on the other side no longer honors who we are. And maybe that's the real message here. You can love people from afar. You can walk away without revenge. You can lose blood and still keep your dignity. I didn't need permission to start over. I needed the courage to stop explaining why I had to. But now, I want to hear from you. Have you ever had to walk away from people who said family, but acted like creditors? What would you have done differently in my shoes? Or maybe you've been through it too. If so, leave a comment below and let me know where you're watching from. If this story spoke to you, just drop a 1 in the comments. And if it didn't, tell me why. Your voice matters too. If this video touched your heart or made you think twice about your own story, please consider subscribing to the channel so you don't miss what's coming next. I promise, this was only one chapter, There are so many more waiting to be told.